Have you ever felt that your life needed a pause? That your heart is searching for answers, but doesn't know where to start? Path of Faith, Discoveries on the Path of the Soul, is not just a book. It's a journey, a real story of overcoming challenges, faith, and transformation that will inspire you to take the next step in your life. Discover how challenges can turn into lessons and how every moment can be an opportunity to reconnect with what truly matters. This book is for those who seek more than stories. It's for those searching for purpose, inspiration, and themselves. Available exclusively on Amazon. Link in the video description. Start your journey of transformation today. Path of Faith, Discoveries on the Path of the Soul. What are you waiting for?
But I found it interesting because it is living a conflict that has been very common these days. She speaks, Father, what has made me suffer is my questioning about life. I see myself. I love myself. I care about what they think of me. But positively. The criticism I use to improve, the compliments between my ego, that's fine. By the way, I was like that. Until I began to question why I was satisfied with these things. After all, it is only important for me, and in concluding that we are all alone. Deep down. We are alone. Reaching this conclusion despaired me. He even withdrew the meaning of what I had for this recognition that the other gave me. And as if only I worry about me, when they talk to me, I feel welcomed. But when I think what other people say are words thrown away, I see how much only I have importance to me. My loneliness deepens. And I wonder then, why live? Why study, work, procreate? If it only makes sense to me. I want to be myself again, because I always loved being who I am. And today I have felt a lot of difficulty living that feeling. This is very common these days, this loss of meaning of life. First, she says something that is very true. Deep down, no one can get rid of this loneliness. Indeed, this book that I will release now, if God willing in June, is called Orphan Days, The Fate of Absences. It is a book of tales in which I, from characters and stories, of course, the other on my side helps me, but ultimately me and my miseries. The other cannot access everything I am, as I always like to say, because I am one totally another. The other is one totally another. As much as I am by that person, I have no way to access all of them. And this inability to be accessed in our entirety generates a loneliness, a feeling of being alone, because it is that moment when you have no words to define what you feel. This is loneliness. It's that feeling that you don't even understand. It's that hurt that you don't even understand why you have. It is in this place of loneliness that all these feelings live that are often difficult to understand. It is now interesting that modern society has greatly accentuated this sense of loneliness by the characteristics that are proper to today. The difficulty of bonds, as we have already spoken at other times as well. The ease with which people are despised, with which they exchange, lack of faithfulness, lack of confidence, often the lack of truth in the relationship. This depends often, this loneliness. It makes us feel increasingly lonely. And I say again, it is not that loneliness of not having someone next door. No, I'm talking about the one you experience inevitably, even if you are surrounded by people. Even at the opening of the book, I'm writing a text to put there. I was thinking about it yesterday. I was writing there. There is no human care that can help us with this sense of loneliness. I think it's the loneliness we're going to try at the time of death, right? Which is when you, even if you have a doctor holding your hand, even if you have a friend, a mother, you go. And I'm not denying the spiritual dimension here. No. I don't like to take weights in my heart. Every time something is being heavy for me, I make a point of finding a way because I don't think it's fair. It's not fair for us to be taking weights. No. This life needs to be lived lightly, and prayer helps us achieve this lightness. I stay all the time realizing the movement of this world that is in me, that is out. How do we follow? How do we have to continue, even with a heavy heart? Life does not stop us to suffer. The world does not for its activities so that we have the opportunity to live our mourning, our sufferings. It may be that many people who are watching us today need to organize a pain inside our hearts. A pain. Such a sharp suffering that we would like the world to stop, so we could suffer it all. But no, everything is still happening and we need to follow this pain in the chest, with this anguish in the look, with this weight on the shoulder and it is painful to think that the human condition is like this. What they do with us we risk. If you do not know how to manage well the trauma that was, we tend to repeat the behavior with other people. Psychology teaches us that it is a way that one tends to do justice to himself, unconscious. It is an unconscious process. We don't always know why we are doing this. Recycling our heart is very important. Could it be may you also have your weights there? Everyone has. You may have a detail of your life, a fact, an event, a person who is heavy for you. It is good for us to be able to fix our lives. So, I don't get anything making a person feeling bad about the life they live. Now, I earn a lot when I help this person, through religious discourse, to reinterpret what he has lived and find out that he can live differently. She can't change the past, but she can change the consequences of the past. And then it is the dynamics of the doorbell that the gospel gives us. We need to be healed from the guilt we feed. I say it for myself. In some moments of my life, I could not deal with regret. I went on the easy way of guilt. Then, feeling the worst person in the world, what happened? I dived even more to sin because the guilt does it with the person. She pushes the person to that territory where she destroys herself. You may need to reconcile with your heart, but to reconcile with your heart, you need to go through reconciliation with each other. Don't waste time. No. It was Jesus who taught us that every time our heart is hurt, every time someone offends us, we need to look at it. We need to have our eyes on him and have the same attitude he would have if he was here. We cannot be. Do it. Do that good to you. Forgive. Reconcile. Do not waste time with grudges, with hurts. Not worth it. When you give and receive forgiveness, it is like being born again. The lightness of early childhood again takes over your heart, which is the opportunity we have to receive this Christ in our walk, in our history. On this floor that is part of our history, our lives, these many roads of life that we walk. Also leading our disappointments, our sorrows, our anguish. How do we have to manage what has done us badly in the past so that we don't come to commit the same thing these days? So that we don't make this vicious movement of reproducing what we reproach the most to do with us one day? It's life. It's the human being. We are a box of records. How are we going to process the information? It will all depend on the conditions to analyze, that we need to look at what we are, what they did to us, and what we want to be with others. Because there is nothing more harmful in a person's life than they live by managing guilt. The fault is the result of a poorly lived life, the mistakes we make, and it is a terrible emotional weight. The guilt gets sick a person. How many times are we heavy from the mistakes we made and the other with the look that offers us, with a smile, let it go. That's silly. No longer bother with that. Sometimes a well-accompanied cry has the power to forgive our sins. I'm not talking about sacramental acquittal, no, I'm just making a parallel, see? I am not saying that one thing nullifies the other, I'm just giving an example so we can understand what happens there. Is complementary. Yes, I get acquitted from my sins when I am with my friends who are able to see me in a better way than I see myself. Yes, I also feed the word of the other. Just as in the Eucharist I have the opportunity to feed on the word of God, I can also feed on the good advice of those who love me. Yes, my people. Because when there is a true friendship, a love without interest. We grow a lot when the other tells us, with what the other tells us. Our misconceptions are so often resolved through good friends. Sometimes people are in drugs, prostitute, are forgotten of their dignities, are in diabolical, sickly relationships. Because these people are missing someone who comes to open captivity. It's a little bit of what I talk about the book Who Stole From Me. How many people wasting such a life, and sometimes even in the name of God, keeping diabolical structures in the name of God, not having the courage to question her husband, to stop an aggression in the name of God. We can't be so, no. Ask Jesus to give you a position to replace this feeling that occurred to him, because the unconscious is like this. He is pressured by what makes him suffer, and then he plays out from time to time. The dream is an opportunity that the unconscious has to throw away everything that presses ITU. That's why we sometimes dream so much absurd. I remember it once. I worked at the Taraboa seminary. I felt so angry with a boy there, a seminarian, during the day, because of an event he made with me, which at night I dreamed that I had tore off his head. In a dream, I was very satisfied. I still kicked his head next door. Past, the boy is... I remember right. The other day, when I woke up, a weight, a horrible thing, which is a feeling like you had really killed. Right? I am like this. The dream affects me a lot, but then guys, that's silly, is the unconscious. I felt so angry at the boy that as I didn't have the courage to curse and say anything, I kept, is the unconscious, releases like this. Me, when I feel sorry, I have a willingness to change what was done bad, although I cannot change the past, but regret puts me conditions to change the present and the future. I broke this glass. I'm sorry. I have no way to rebuild the glass, but I can establish a different relationship with the glasses that will come from now on. Just one example, simple care. So, okay, I know the glass is fragile. I won't deal with it anyway. I take the fragility of the glass and step to reflect mine. I am a fragile person. I know exactly that if it is exposed to a certain kind of situation, the devil makes the party on me. So I prefer not to expose myself to those situations. Oh. But what if I get alienated? No. It is staying within what I know is better for me. I do not need to expose myself to certain situations that I know will speak too loud, and that may well withdraw from my axis. Yes, when we are with each other, we feed on the presence of the other. I always say that. When we sit at the table, it's not just the body we feed. It's not just the hunger of the body we kill. We also kill the hunger we have from each other. This is Eucharistic. Being at the table with the other is Eucharistic. We are feeding on what the other spiritually offers us. Your love, your friendship, your faithfulness, your understanding. Being at the table with your son without hurry, delay, with the luxury of delay, because today it takes a luxury. We almost have no right to take a long time. Fast food, always very fast. We eat quickly. Sometimes we don't sit at the table, there is no time. We do not have time. So when we have this time to lose, as it says in Patience music, we celebrate because we are together with delay without hasten. This is Eucharistic. Because I'm sorry, I need to continue what regret proposes me. Maybe it's for us.
Father Fabio, I've wanted to write to you for a long time. Here's the situation. I lost my oldest son, who was 30 years old, in a motorcycle accident. And since then, I haven't been living as a person anymore. I have depression, and life has lost its meaning for me. I also know that your mother lost a daughter in a very tragic accident. I would like you to help me. Please, give me an answer that can ease my anguish. I know that many other people also go through this difficulty, right? You. Didn't mention how long you've lived with this experience. I don't know how long ago the accident with your son happened. I'll speak from the experience I saw in my own home. The death of my sister was very tragic for all of us. It's not easy to lose. My mother, especially, lost a daughter at 29. Years old, full of life, beautiful, full of projects, with a son to raise. And suddenly, we received the news of her death, perhaps one of the most painful moments my family has had to face to this day. I remember when I found my mother. As soon as I arrived, I was living in Taraboa at the time. I traveled all day to get there, received the news in the morning, and managed to get to my mother's house that night. And I remember that I found a woman extremely distressed. Of course, it's natural for it to be like that. My mother was devastated, poor thing. But I noticed that in that woman's hands was a small object. It was a rosary, very small, which she held from the moment she heard the news of my sister's death. What I saw immediately after was a harsh suffering, really harsh. I witnessed many terrible situations involving my mother's pain. My mother had to go to Belo Horizonte soon after, where my sister lived. Her apartment was closed. After the accident, my mother had to go there, collect her things, store everything. And I realized that watching my mother face all that, I discovered something. No one dies all at once. The accident happens one day, and for a long time, we have to give ourselves this news. I saw this in myself too. And what did I experience from this pain? That when we lose someone in such a tragic way, we need to give ourselves this news every day. Because interestingly, it's not that it hurts more or less, it's that we are less prepared, right? If you follow a person's illness, you follow that process. There comes a time when the family almost wishes that person would stop suffering. But not in this case. When someone is abruptly taken from our lives, like your son was, like my sister was, like so many other stories, like what has happened in so many families where children were drastically taken from their homes, from their families, because of accidents, died, and suddenly are no longer there, we find that we will organize the mourning every day. There's no way around it. Every day I woke up and felt the impact of that terrible news. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night. I cried a lot because my sister left a huge void in my life. Time changes the way we feel it. But it was very hard, very hard. And I remember that my mother went through the same process. She talked about the struggle it was for her to face that house without my sister's presence, to live through that painful process of going to the apartment where she lived, organizing her things, arranging everything so that life could go on. In my mother's organization of her grief, God was present the whole time. You know, I think that scene I saw on the day of my sister's death, my mother holding that rosary, a symbol of faith, was, for me, like seeing the result of faith in a person's life. Not once did I see my mother blaspheming. Not once did I see my mother rebelling against God, even though I think that is also natural. If you have blasphemed, if you are angry with God, don't blame yourself for it. I think this process is natural, right? I repeat, every day we give ourselves the news. Every day you need to tell yourself, my son is dead. And the reactions will be different because the human heart is dynamic. We cannot expect the same response. One day you will be a little angrier. One day you will be calmer. One day you will be, I don't know, lighter. One day it will be heavier. What we cannot lose sight of is that from the moment the loss happens, it is our responsibility with those who remain to guide our grief in the right way. It has to be honest. I cannot, from a loss, make my life and the lives of those around me unworkable. By the way, my people, I keep thinking that we only recover because of others. We have to take a back seat. But when we look at those who remain, and for my mother, for her to recover from my sister's death, it was essential that she could look at Conrado, my sister's son, who remained and who my mother needed to finish raising. And my mother saw in that boy a reason to live. So we need to. Discover what the other left us, what my son left me. That can be a starting point for my recovery. My people, there are no magic formulas. What worked for my mother may not work for you, but what worked for her may work for you. I'm not saying it's a rule that all mothers will face loss in the same way. What I'm saying is that there are elements that are the same in the organization of grief. This is what psychology teaches us. Every time we lose someone, when we need to deal with the absence of someone, we have to find a starting point that can help us resume life. And usually this starting point is directly linked to the life of the one who left. Now, my dear, the process is yours. The struggle is yours. We want to help you. We want, with this word, perhaps to put a new meaning in your life. But I am sure that if you seek to go without God, He will not abandon you. My mother is a woman who teaches me this all the time. God is part of my mother's life. All the time she talks about Him, she lives from Him. All her hopes are placed in Him. Pray about your pain, without magic formulas, without ready-made formulas. Tell God everything that is in your heart. Talk about your grief, your despair, your difficulty in accepting this fact. I'm sure God will not leave you helpless. I'm sure God will give you the necessary comfort. And gradually, through your own effort as well, coupled with divine grace, you will have the grace to find the path to joy again. You may never be the woman you were before your son's passing, but who knows? You might be better because of the suffering you've experienced. I always hear this. Father, I will never be the same person again, but let this new person who is emerging be better than the one who was there before. I believe that no one should die in vain. Such suffering cannot be in vain. If it visited my life, I want it to leave me with a great lesson. If it hurt me, if it makes me cry, I want it to generate within me a lesson, a maturity. That's what we need to ask God for every day. That our suffering is not in vain. That when it passes through us, it provokes in you, a new person, but a better person, so that we may have the grace to say, after that pain, I was never the same, but for the better. So there are people, for example, I know a mother who had a son brutally murdered, who lost his life brutally. And after her son's death, she had to create a group. She had a collective therapy group of mothers who lost their children in the same way. Of course, well managed, these groups do a lot of good because we know that every time we have the opportunity to share our pain with someone who experiences similar pain, we feel more understood. Because one of the major factors that generate loneliness is realizing that others do not know how to feel as we feel and are not interested in making an effort to feel. It's interesting that there is a statistic about couples who, after the loss of a child, go through very serious marital crises. And in many cases, there is separation. The child dies, and the marriage that was great, that was fine, suddenly goes into crisis, and the couples separate. Why? Because there is a very big difference in the way men and women deal with pain. The man feels the same. He deeply feels the pain of losing a child, but it is very different from the way the woman feels. The man has an easier time resuming life, starting over. So the woman often sees this as an affront to the pain she feels. That is why many couples, after losing their children, need psychological and therapeutic support so that the marriage does not go into crisis, because we know there's a very high tendency for separation due to a different way of understanding the same pain. No doubt, it's very good when we know that the other is feeling with us. This causes closeness, but it also generates division when you insist or realize that the other is not feeling with the same intensity. So, we need help. Thank you for joining us on this spiritual journey at Path of Faith. Your participation is key to our community's growth, so please leave your comments, give us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more uplifting content.